Hey, what's going on, traders? Happy Tuesday. I hope you guys have all been having an amazing day today and we're all able to end green. But as usual, I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's recap. And so, as you guys can tell from the screen, unfortunately, today was a pretty big red day for me. So, I was down about $150 on TQQQ and I was only up about $23 on SQQQ, right? So, I was down about $130 on the day in terms of my day trading. And you guys can see my filled orders, right? I started trading at about 6:32 and didn't stop until 9:36, right? So I was trading for about 3 hours today. And so I want to go ahead and explain to you guys exactly, what my thought process was today and where my mistakes were so that hopefully you guys can, learn something from it as well. But what I pretty much saw going on was the Nasdaq was indicating signs of an uptrend all pre-market, right? How do I know this? Well, it was trading between the top and middle VWAP, right? As it would sell off to middle VWAP, it would eventually find a support, bounce, and reverse itself back up, right? And continue to uptrend. And ultimately, what we ended up seeing was this thing was continuously uptrending, but trading more sideways, right? And heading into market open, what ended up happening? Well, as we can see, right, the Nasdaq tried popping for a bit, right, but it got rejected and started a sell off on the day. And so, with this thing constantly selling off, and as you guys can see, right, I actually started to buy in to SQQQ, right, to begin the day. So where did I go wrong, right? How was I only able to end up $23 on SQQQ when it really sold off, right? And how did I lose so much on TQQQ? Well, what I pretty much thought was going to happen was I knew we were overbought, but I wasn't too sure because of the strong, consistent pattern, right, that we had pre-market, whether or not this thing was going to continue to uptrend if we pulled on back, right, to middle VWAP, if this thing was going to continue to uptrend and, continue the pattern that we saw going on, or, right, if this thing was going to start to sell off. But I decided again to SQQQ and try riding it to middle VWAP, but ultimately this thing continued to sell off and I tried to predict the bottom, right, guys? You guys are probably tired of hearing it about it, right? I'm really tired about saying it, but I always lose money when I try to predict where something is. I try to predict the bottom of something, right? And so today, this thing started to sell off, and although I knew, right, based off of yesterday's video, I even talked about it, right, that on the past 10-day chart, what we'll notice is that anytime the Nasdaq pulled up to around these levels, right, it would eventually get rejected and start to sell off. And so we did, push up very nicely, right? We did start to sell off a bit, begin to pick back up, and right at market open, that's where we did peak out. And unfortunately, we did form this double top here, right, where we got rejected from where we did last time and started to pull back aggressively. Now, right in the morning, it started to sell off, and rather than be too focused on, whether or not this thing could reverse here, what I should have noticed was that this thing very aggressively sold off and didn't even try bouncing at the middle VWAP, really, right? What you guys will notice if I zoom in is, right, this is a huge red bar. This thing didn't even try to bounce. So if this thing didn't even try to bounce here, right, what it could have indicated to me was this thing was ready to sell off on the day. And as long as this thing continue to sell off, I should have really just focused on getting into the inverse ETF, right? But where did I go wrong? Well, I kept trying to predict the bottom on TQQQ, right? This thing would sell off. It would start to, consolidate a bit. So I thought we were going to start a reverse before we continue to sell off, but that didn't happen. I'd buy into TQQQ, average up, it'd get rejected, and then I'd have to cut it, right? And so this thing would sell off, and then I'd cut it completely. And then I kept telling myself rather than get into SQQQ because this thing sold off so much already that it's bound to reverse, right? Let me just try to get in when I think it's time for TQQQ, right? And so as this thing would sell off, I'd be buying in, try to predict the bottom. It would continue to sell off. I'd have to cut losses. Then around here, right, this thing started to consolidate again, right? And then started to form these higher lows and higher highs. So I bought back into TQQQ. I stopped paying attention to SQQQ, and this thing continued to sell off, right? And so as it would trade sideways, right, and really change directions very aggressively, right, as this thing started to pick back up, I kept trying to sell the idea that the Nasdaq had to recover on the day, right? I kept telling myself, well, this thing sold off so aggressively within a short period of time that it's bound to recover, right? It has to recover. But as we know in the stock market, nothing has to happen. And so, given the fact that this thing was selling off very hard, right, what I should have noticed was this thing was, there's a good chance that the selling pressure is going to be too high on the day and it's going to take too long before this thing even reverses, right? And so that this thing can stay bearish all day. And that's exactly what ended up happening. Rather than trying to predict where the bottom was, I could have continued to ride all this selling pressure, right? Maybe not traded on areas that were more choppy. But once it would start to sell off again, I could have gotten back in, right? And just continue to do that all day. Even right to market close, there was this nice little play here you could have gotten. And so it sucks because I was just focused on just trying to find the bottom of TQQQ, right? So I was down $150, right? Big mistake it cost me. I was only up $23 on SQQQ, right? So definitely not the best day at all, but there was lots of movement, right? Lots of money to be made. I just traded very poorly, did a horrible job of managing my risk, and so I need to own up to that and, really try to perfect that heading into, the rest of the week. But that's pretty much my big mistake of the day. So I would really, really advise you guys to go with direction, right? Stop trying to predict the bottom of everything. It can really just bite you in the butt like it did to me, right? Use me as an example. And as this thing continues to sell off, right? As I mentioned, it doesn't have nothing has to recover just because it's sold off so aggressively within a short period of time, right? For if anything, this thing can just continue to stay bearish because of the fact that there's so much selling pressure, right? And as you guys see, right, the Nasdaq did have room to fall today, so that's definitely my mistake, right? I should have definitely seen that once it got aggressively rejected right at market open, there was a chance this thing could continue to bleed on the day. And so, I no excuses for the poor risk management that I did. I definitely need to work on that. And I really, really need to work on the idea of not trying to predict reversals. Because, as I mentioned today, like, I could have just been riding SQQQ down and made a killing today rather than, have the opposite end of, the spectrum. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about today. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the channel today. One thing I do want to forget before, or I do want to mention before I forget, tomorrow is actually a very big meeting at 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. There's going to be an FOMC meeting, right? So Federal Open Market Committee and the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, he's pretty much just going to give a speech where he's going to announce what type of rate hike we're going to see, right? Given the fact that inflation is still super high, the federal government wants to do their best to try to get it down, right? So, how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to keep raising interest rates. And that's exactly what we're going to see tomorrow. There's going to be a meeting 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, right? So, if you're in a position, anything even long term, you definitely just want to try to watch the market if possible because this thing can definitely drive the market up or down depending on what's released. They are expecting, the Federal Reserve to try to raise the interest rates by about a 0.75% rate hike, right? And that's what's expected. So if it's anything more, we can see the market fall. If it's, anything as expected or less, it could act as a positive catalyst and we could potentially see a pop. So it's definitely going to be very exciting tomorrow. And so I am excited to, see what happens and then let you guys know what actually ended up happening. But thank you guys so much again for tuning into the video today. If you guys are new, we do appreciate you dropping a like and subscribing. And other than that, if you guys have any questions at all, want me to break down any stock for you, any stock indicator, go ahead, drop a comment, and I will be more than happy to do that. But that's everything. I will see you guys tomorrow for my recap. Take care and have a good rest of your day.